Hey everyone, Anthony here, and in this video we're summarizing the camera releases put out this year in 2024, and at the end of the video I think I'll tell you what brand in my opinion is the king or queen of 2024. I usually have chapters put on these videos, so if you have a favorite camera brand, you can kind of skim through the video to what you like best and kind of jump around. But if you do plan on watching this one all the way through, let me know your preferred camera brand in the comment section down below, and maybe leave me let's go with a camera emoji, but no natural light emojis because flash is the way to go. Leave that down in the comments if you plan on watching this all the way through. That being said, let's dive in. I just got done nearly editing this entire video, and then just last night Nikon releases the Z50Mkii, which kind of throws a wrench into a few points that I was about to make. Unfortunately, I obviously don't have too much information about the Z50Mkii, but from what I'm seeing online, here's the breaking news. Some of the big improvements on the Z50Mkii are video related specs. I obviously can't show you the image quality because I didn't hear really anything about this camera until right now. But from the other quick examples I saw online, the video looks good, and there is some integration between RED camera and the ability to apply those red LUTs onto the N-Log picture profile, which is likely a hint as to what's to come. And it's nice to see a log picture profile in a Nikon entry-level camera. That news surrounding the merge between Nikon and RED is going to have some effect on the video-related market, and we're starting to see that effect take place within this camera. The camera does shoot 4K up to 60p, but it is a little bit unfortunate that there is a crop when you enter into the 60 frames per second mode. There is not IBIS on this camera, but the autofocus improvements do look very promising, and the eye tracking in photo mode seems to work really well. It's certainly an improvement over version 1, that is for sure. Now, we're gonna have to circle back to this camera later on when I have more information. As of recording this right now, I think the camera is around 1,100 Canadian maple syrup coins, but we're gonna have to confirm on henrys.com when the camera actually goes up. Like I said, I just heard this announcement and I'm just making a quick edit to this video. Other than that, this camera remains tiny, and the new button layout is very similar to the Z6Mkii, which we can talk more about right now. So the Nikon Z6Mkii was Nikon's biggest release of the year, and I love a lot of these cameras that are around the $3,000 price point. I feel like there's a lot of value here. This camera is $3,300, and the thing with the Z6Mkii is you're getting some of the things that are in the Z8, and the Z8 is giving you some things that are in the Z9. So this is what I mean when I say that there's some good value at this price point. So with the Z6Mkii, this is the world's first partially stacked CMOS sensor camera, meaning that the readout speeds, they were dramatically improved over the Z6Mkii. And this is one of those cameras that kind of makes you think about like the future of like hybrid photo and video shooters. And just the cameras that they have. Although we have fully stacked sensors, so maybe it isn't as big of a deal as some of the other announcements we're about to talk about in a moment. But for Nikon and the mirrorless world in general, this was a big deal. This is a very cost-effective way to give users high-performing cameras at a lower cost, and that's the big deal about a partially stacked sensor. The camera has 120 frames per second with pre-burst shooting modes when in that photo mode, but this camera also has 6K raw video up to 60p, and there is ProRes recording internally, which is not common but awesome because that means that the editing of these files is going to be a breeze. The downside here is the files are huge with ProRes recording. I took a few clips in store and it was nearly 5 gigs per minute. That is madness, but the colors did look fantastic. Like this looks so good. What Nikon needs to improve on in 2025 is just getting better dynamic range into their cameras, including some of those heavy video features in body, such as like false color and waveforms. We're still missing a few things like that. Even the ability to throw a histogram on the screen while recording, I wasn't able to figure that out. Maybe that's a thing, but I could be wrong there. But if they can do that, then I think they're going to be a top contender for video, and I think they can actually do it because this year's, like this year, the biggest news from Nikon was purchasing Red, the cinema camera company, and the trickle-down effects from that are yet to be seen. We're seeing things like the Z50Mkii at getting a N-Log picture profile and then integrating those red LUTs onto a Nikon camera. Those are available on the website right now, so you can transform that N-Log picture profile into a red look. This is just the beginning, and things are going to get very interesting for Nikon hybrid photo and video shooters. I'm excited to watch this all unfold. But thank you, Nikon, for ruining the continuity of this whole video. Right as I just hung up all this wallpaper, Nikon releases a new camera as I'm making this video. Awesome. The Sony A9iii was Sony's biggest release in 2024, but we can't forget about the ZV-E10 as well. That had some really welcomed updates, but the A9iii, this is just like the sports, wildlife, video photographer and videographer's dream camera. This has a global shutter, so no rolling shutter, but also has dramatic effects on flash photography as well, because the global shutter is exposing all of the pixels on the sensor at the exact same time. No curtains, no problem. That's what Sony was saying this over this past year, which is really crazy for a mirrorless camera. No rolling shutter for video shooters and next to no sync speed while shooting flash. This technology has never been seen before in a mirrorless camera, that is. And this is a huge deal for mirrorless tech in general. This had me totally kind of rethinking how to shoot flash with a camera such as this, but unfortunately I wasn't offered this camera just before launch because the only one available to demo in North America broke while another camera store was using it. I'm not pointing fingers here, but if you know who you are, you know. The ZV-E10 was also released this year and got a complete overhaul to the menu, so that's a welcomed improvement. And the main complaint over on the version 1 was the menu. This camera now shoots 4K up to 60p, and you can record 10-bit 422 as well, which is great considering this camera body only costs $13.99, body only, that is. The screen got brighter and sharper, and the image quality also just got overall better as well, thanks to S-Log recording. Sony was also hearing complaints about their smaller APS-C cameras having poor battery life when they were using that smaller FW50 battery. So on this ZV-E10 you now use the same battery as their full-frame cameras, the FW100. That is a big improvement. But for a long time, people complained about Sony's color science, always being like a bit orange, and with this new sensor on this camera, the skin tones do look a little bit more pleasing. And this sensor was actually taken from the FX30 camera, and I really like that camera when I was trying out the FX30, and that was put into the ZV-E10 The image quality you get from such a small, affordable camera is fantastic. So this is an awesome improvement over the older Sony cameras, even if older really only means like 2 years ago. Totally a great buy for somebody shopping on a tight budget. Gotta be careful though when using that camera for longer takes due to the camera's performance. It's a high performing camera in a very small compact body, and there is no fan on the camera. The camera can experience overheating if outside shooting on warmer days or just shooting for long periods of time. So really this isn't for somebody looking to shoot long clips, but vloggers, run and gun video shooters, just taking little clips here and there, family stuff, that's going to be totally fine. But you will start to feel that camera overheat if you start to record like say 30-40 minutes, and you'll feel it in the hands. You just need to give the camera a little bit of a break if you're shooting for longer periods of time. Great value and great image quality for the price though. Canon had a killer year this year, releasing 2 flagship cameras, the Canon R1 and the R5Mkii. The Canon cinema space also ran hot with the recent release of the C80 and the C400. The mirrorless cameras Canon put out this year gave Sony a real good run for their money, and I think people need to watch Jared Polins' video where he put out this video on the R5Mkii, and there's the video title was called "Canon's New Autofocus is Mind-Blowing." following, exclamation point, crushes Sony and Nikon, this is a video about the R1 and R5 Mark II autofocus. Nobody is talking about this, and I feel like people regularly just default to being like Sony is the king of autofocus, and this video by Jared has me kind of rethinking who that crown is currently sitting with. The AI focusing features within the camera is crazy, and no action sports photographer should go without at least looking at the R5 Mark II and how the R1 is now performing. Caveat though, these cameras are pricey. The R1 is coming in at $85.99. The R5 Mark II body only is $58.99, and that's in Canadian dollars. Canon took a lot of heat when they put out that OG R5, and the R5 Mark II is now a camera that is pretty well near perfect. It's still pricey, but the camera that they're offering you is it should get anybody pumped to put this in their camera kit. I would consider getting this one for myself, to be honest, and I haven't owned a Canon in like 7 years or something like that. The cinema space is actually mostly forgotten just because of the price, but the C80 looks kind of undervalued at $72.99 in maple syrup coins, that is. You have a full frame 6K camera with all the cinema features you could want in a camera that costs well below the 10,000 Canadian loonies. I get it, you know, that feels a little bit loony to say that a camera costs $72.99 and is undervalued, but for all this camera is offering, I think people are going to be debating going with a cinema camera over a flagship Canon camera now. And if you're a video shooter of any kind, I think you should at least take a look. The C400, you know, we won't get too deep into the weeds here just because it's not high on our customer list, like it's not high on that priority list, but it is an amazing camera for 11,000 Canadian, and some people will be like, what? Like 11 grand? No way. Well, what you don't understand is cinema cameras have never been this affordable before. So 11,000 actually kind of feels cheap for this caliber of camera. This isn't going to be like the YouTuber, like the intermediate kind of price point, but I think this is the dream setup if you're, say, like a run and gun documentary shooter. This is an awesome camera that has really never been this low in terms of the price versus the specs that we actually get on a cinema camera. Fujifilm also had a killer year thanks to the hype on TikTok about like the X100VI. The demand for this camera is insane, and I know a lot of people are still waiting on getting theirs from their the pre-orders that started earlier this year. It's pretty crazy, and I do want to let you know, I did hear we are continuing to get shipments and we are fulfilling pre-orders right now, but the shipments that we do get just go right to those people who are waiting in line. So if you're looking into this camera like I am, just put a deposit down and be patient. There has not been this much hype for a camera in a very long time, but for good reason. This camera is beautiful, and I'm not sure there is a better looking modern mirrorless camera, and the specs are also beefed up compared to the other cameras at this price point as well, but also compared to the X100 version 5. We get 6K recording, 40 megapixel photos, and a backside illuminated sensor, and a sharp fixed lens that we all know and love. That's the 23mm f2, that's the pancake lens that's fixed to the body. The film simulations are all up to date on this camera, including like Provia, Classic Neg, Astia, and Reala Ace. This is all close to, as close as you can get to shooting film without actually paying those film prices. And when I shoot on these types of cameras, the images coming out of this camera or anything like the X100 cameras really don't ever really need to be edited that much, especially ever since you were able to add that tone curve in camera. I was like, okay, I think I'm close to like canceling my Lightroom subscription after they put that in one of their newer models. And of course, that's all combined into one camera, the X100VI. The autofocus has been updated to track things like birds and people better, and the big things that were added were actually a ton of more video related specs like 6K. I mentioned that before, but in 422 10-bit, you're recording all of that to a single card slot. And I did mention the X100VI. Did I mention that it has IBIS? This tiny little camera has IBIS. The X-T50 and the X-M5 were the other APS-C sensor cameras that were released this year as well. Both of these cameras, they sit on the more affordable end of cameras in general. The X-M5 coming in at a really competitive price point, that being just over 1,000 Canadian maple syrup coins. The X-T50 is just shy of 2K if you're going in for the kit, and I think most people are going to be doing that. That would probably be my recommendation, just to get you started. The X-T50 is a camera people are going to jump on, and it is in high demand as well. This camera, along with the X-M5, has that new film simulation dial, making it easier to switch between film simulations. And I would be constantly swapping between something like maybe classic chrome, classic neg, and Acros yellow if you want to throw in a black and white profile there. If I own those cameras, that's what I would be doing. Something for you to try out if you have the cameras right now or are waiting patiently for yours to arrive. These are flowing through, so this won't be like a long wait if you place your order, like say right now. I did make us a whole video on YouTube talking about video specs and the video specs that actually matter. And if you want to watch that, that's the video with the thumbnail of the X-M5. The X-M5 is a killer camera for around 1,000 Canadian. It really did surprise me. The X-M5 even has a feature like a countdown timer for when shooting things specifically for, say, like a TikTok video or an Instagram reel or a story post. So if you want to know that you're getting exactly, say, like 15 seconds, 30 seconds, or a minute long video, then the camera actually displays that countdown timer on the screen. And then the Fujifilm's whole goal is making the transition from smartphone to interchangeable lens camera just so much more simple. And these are two great cameras for that type of person for sure. There's so much to go over on these two cameras alone, but these are not the only cameras shaking up the photography industry made by Fujifilm in 2024. A camera that I got to try personally this year was the GFX 100S Mark II, and I'm not often taken aback by cameras because once you've tried a few, like you pretty much tried them all, but the GFX medium format cameras has speed and it also has crazy image quality, and these two things are often not said in the same sentence. Autofocus tracks animals like birds and dogs no problem. The 7 frames per second on a medium format camera is kind of unheard of. Hasselblad, I think, is the only competition in the medium format world that is really kind of going head to head with Fujifilm. They made a big deal about the X2D when that came out in 2022. That camera is an absolute snail compared to the speed of the GFX 100S Mark II. It's really, really crazy. And that's what I was kind of confused when shooting with that camera, because the autofocus feels like an X-T5, but the image quality is just like every other medium format camera out there. And especially when compared to Hasselblad, very, very similar to them, but like so much less in terms of the price. And again, like so many different ways to edit the photos in camera, so many different ways to make that autofocus even more sticky, more stickier than any other medium format on the market, that is for sure. This is changing the game for medium format shooters and bringing the cost way down compared to the competition. I'm excited to see what comes down the road for Fujifilm and their medium format cameras for sure. Panasonic is trying their hand at the Fujifilm film simulations, but in a completely different feel. This camera that really kicked this off was the Panasonic S9, released in this past year. It included a LUT feature for photography, and this means you can create presets in Photoshop, edit the photo how you like on the computer, then drop that LUT onto your camera and just shoot JPEGs in the look that you've already edited. I tried this feature myself. I loaded a bunch of LUTs onto my S5 Mark II, and I really like the execution of this feature, but it's a different feel than the film simulations for sure. Panasonic isn't trying to make their cameras feel like, you know, you're shooting on film. They're trying to make it easier to get great looking photos out of their cameras, And you can do that across a number of different camera models now. It's not just the Panasonic S9. You just need to update the firmware on your maker model. Make sure that you're running the latest version. I did that on the S5 Mark II, and I really enjoyed the whole process as well. It was pretty straightforward. The S9 comes in at $21.49 Canadian, and this is meant to be that camera that you just kind of point and shoot with, but with some pro features to go along with it as well. Maybe more aimed at the intermediate or like the pro shooter, and you have your big like working camera, say the S5 Mark II or the S5 Mark IIX, and then there's the smaller S9. It's a camera that's totally capable of nearly identical image quality, but when you're kind of comparing those big dog cameras, but the S9 is just so much smaller and did remove a few things, like for example the viewfinder, to make that camera body so much smaller. Smaller body does mean you can't record for longer takes like on the S5 Mark II or the X version. The camera has a hard stop when recording longer video clips that you should be aware of, but the camera does still have that full frame sensor, giving you all that creamy like autofocus goodness that you want from your big dog camera like the S5 Mark II. I did a whole unboxing video on this camera, so I'll link that down below, where we're kind of go into a little bit deeper into the specs and everything you'd want to know, because there are other cameras that we didn't cover this year, like the GH7 as well. The GH7 is Panasonic telling us that micro four thirds cameras are not dead. And honestly, I'm sorry, I thought that was the case. I saw a few YouTubers pairing this next to the ARRI Alexa, and that's because Panasonic can output in an ARRI log color profile. This is actually kind of crazy because ARRI Alexa cameras cost like $10 million bajillion, so it's understandable why you might not want to buy a second camera and run a 2-camera setup, with the price being what they are for ARRI cameras. But for like the 12 people who actually own the ARRI camera, now you can get a GH7 and match your camera to an ARRI camera, and nobody will really know the difference. Sorta, I'm being over exaggerating to save time here. This video is getting pretty long, so let's crown a winner. The winner of 2024. Well, let me first say I really thought long and hard about what Canon and Nikon and Sony released this year as well. Canon is giving customers what they asked for. Unfortunately, I think a few people might have jumped ship after the R5 was released, and one great camera isn't gonna bring them back for now. The C80, that was an awesome camera. I would like to get one of those myself, but those cameras aren't like game-changing for photography or just content creation as a whole, so I don't see them being like the winner of 2024. The Z6Mkii, now that was a camera that was adding a few features that we've never really seen before, but I don't think one camera can take the crown for 2024. So even though like Canon, Nikon, and Sony, they did do some wild stuff, I think I'm going with Fujifilm. Now, let me explain. The X100 it was a little overhyped, and even Fujifilm didn't even expect this level of demand for this camera. It was absolutely insane, but it was a mixture of putting out such a great camera for just over $1,000 Canadian. That was the X-M5. The quality for the money is really freaking good, and that camera is tiny. But then we also combine that with like the best looking camera of 2024, that being the X100. There's no competition there for sure. But again, that was Fujifilm. But that wasn't it, right? Like they're also giving photographers that crazy speed in a medium format camera body, and that has never seen before. We've never seen that before, right? All of this combined kind of makes me think that Fujifilm takes 2024. Sony's A9 Mark III, that does make me think about like there's probably some mad scientists over there working on some products that are going to come in 2025, but we'll have to wait and see. That camera, that is also changing the way people capture content, but if one camera can't take the crown for 2024, I think it's got to be Fujifilm. Let me know in the comments down below. But that is the yearly wrap up. Thanks for being with us. Subscribe to the Henry's YouTube channel. Follow us on Instagram. My name's Anthony, and I'll see you in the next one.